Hello humans, hello humans. Later in the morning, still the 17th, and we're heading back out. I got some stuff done, and now I got to get out and get some chores finished. But let's talk time for a minute. Time and hyperspace. So, humans can reach hyperspace by way of psychedelics. And when you go to hyperspace, you have to, there's a particular technique where you can use microdosing to get there. It's more controllable than shamanic levels. It's a shorter duration. I'm talking mushrooms or mescaline, not like DMT. DMT is like a cannon. It just blows you right through hyperspace. You don't have a chance to, take off your rain gear and set a spell. You're just blown right through it. Anyway, in hyperspace, there is no sensation or appreciation for duration or time in that regard. So it is hyperspace is the incredible now. It is the perpetual now. There's no thought in hyperspace of any time other than that particular instant that you happen to be in. There is time, and you're aware of time. When I was there, I would kick back when I had mescaline. I would kick back and talk to this guy that had sort of a flat head and slightly yellowish skin, and had his emotions riding up over on the top of his skin, right? They were like biophotons that were emitted through the skin that were colored, and they reflected his emotional state, or hormonal, or whatever. I mean, you don't get like an encyclopedia. Knowledge takes fucking years to extract out of your experience, so it's not like it's crystal clear at any given moment what the hell's going on relative to such details. Other things are crystal clear. Speaking of crystals, time in hyperspace was crystalline in nature, and it moved in this like riverbed. Now bear in mind, in hyperspace, everything is alive. Every single fucking molecule is screaming for your attention, trying to get hold of you, and basically what's happening is you are inundated with all of the frequencies of all of the stuff that's in hyperspace, not just your own body, which you're continually aware of in a way that you cannot grasp when you're out of hyperspace, or if you've never been there, but everything is calling for your attention. So to look at time and study it, and study the crystals of time within the riverbed is a monumental task, because the riverbed itself is screaming for your attention. The non-water that is there is screaming for your attention. All of these things are going on, and so it's very difficult to get focused and learn shit, right? But what was really interesting about the time aspect of it, the crystalline nature of time within hyperspace, is that each and every one of the crystals, had you had the ability to really focus, you could have looked in on any of the facets of any of those crystals and seen the events that were going to happen in that time that crystal encapsulated. It's fucking impossible to do, and there's no reference point, right? So just because you might have seen something in one of these crystals that was like a landslide or a big fire or something, well, there's like no anchor. There's no way to tell where in all of our universe those events were taking place. It wasn't like that you were given anything that was specific to you, and at that level, right? So this is what it might have been on a planet that you would never even know of, right? Never even know its name. And just because you thought you saw humans on that planet doesn't necessarily mean they were actually there. that, you know, that this shit is tricky. This is one of those reasons why my journeys through hyperspace is one of the reasons why I don't accept the idea of Joe of JSNIP 4 with the idea of, quote, spirits as these somehow, I guess, semi-divine. You know, I mean, he's really a little vague about what these spirits are. But he's basically saying they are somehow beings or life or whatever outside of himself that provides these visions in his dreams. And it's like, okay, I can understand getting visions in dreams, and I do agree that his dream about the reaching 38,000 on Bitcoin and then the crash actually was prophetic and happened, because he fell out of the sky in an airplane when Bitcoin reached 38,000 and he sold, right? So, but here's the thing. I live in a universe that does not know my name. Okay, so when you go to hyperspace, you don't have a name. You don't, you know, there is none of that. You do not have a name. Names are attached to bodies. All right, so here's the thing. In my universe doesn't know who the fuck I am, and any apparent seeming favoritism on the part of universe for me specifically has to be taken into the context of that moment in terms of what universe needs to have done. It's not for me, it's for its own purpose, right? So universe may seemingly do something that favors me in order that something else may occur that I'm totally unaware of. And if I'm an ignorant pig, as most humans are, and I'm saying most humans, like, you know, 99.99999% of humans don't get this. And so in their world, they would have something that favored them. So in this case, you know, Joe very easily could have slipped into that thing where he could have gotten the idea that universe favored him by keeping them alive through that crash. And that was a point of seeming, I mean, like really fucking lucky favoritism on the part of universe. But what you have to understand from my perspective is that we live in a very mechanistic universe, and it wasn't that the universe was being kind to Joe, it's that it needs Joe later on. So you don't die before your time in this universe, right? I'm proof of that. But universe kept saying, hey, fucker, you know, you screwed up, but I'm not done with you yet, right? And so it brings me back. And poor Joe has had this happen. Now, I know guys that have had stuff that was nearly as miraculous as that, right? Not quite as dramatic as Joe's falling out of the sky. But I know a guy that was on a river patrol PT boat in Vietnam, okay? And there were like 11 people on the boat. They usually have a crew of 3 or 4 people. This was in the Mekong Delta. And they were patrolling and shit, right? And the boat was destroyed by an RPG, basically. It was a rocket. And the whole boat just is like obliterated. And this guy survived. All the other 10... And so this guy, he thought it was like personal, okay? The universe liked him for more than just his participation in stuff. And so this guy, he went, you know, totally batshit religious, and he's an evangelical preacher now. And actually, he went a little bit crazy on it, and I don't know what universe is going to do with him, if it already has used him or whatever the fuck, but his life is not doing well since he got really sunk in with the idea that that was a personal thing that universe did for him. So I don't see Joe surviving the airplane crash as favoritism from universe for Joe, for Joe's benefit. Joe's benefit in surviving, in my opinion, is like a side effect, an artifact of what's going on. Because universe does not know our names. It doesn't deal with us this way. Okay, so this is also why I think channeling is a bunch of horseshit, right? So now there are non-corporeal entities in our existence that we can interact with them. It gets really complicated. I don't want to go into all of that shit at the moment. And so you can open yourself up to shit, right? It is not what you are thinking in terms of demons or being this constructed being and so on. You really need to read, I think it's chapter 4 in Thinking and Destiny, to get into the whole mishmash of that deep part of this woo. That's not my point here to discuss that. I wanted to discuss the nature of time and time and relativity, but not relativity the way that Einstein defines it, but actually relativity to consciousness. And so in my world, time powers everything. And it powers everything through this pulse. And that pulse leaves an after effect within our materium that we call time with a little t. And that is really duration. It's our ability to sense duration. Well, fuck. There was a sheriff going like 90 miles an hour the other direction. No sirens, but his light's going. We've had all kinds of accidents. We've had terrible weather out here. People have got frozen pipes up the or down in all of the ground in the area south of me. We've been lucky with that, but it's really been brutal. It's been the worst year in the years I've lived on the coast here for storms. Anyway, so time powers everything through the pulse. The after effect of the pulse is duration, and neither of the pulse exists in hyperspace, but duration does not. You have no sensation of the passage of time in hyperspace, and so it is factual to state that you can actually, if you could arrange it, it could be done deliberately. But I have, let's say accidentally, I mean, universe wanted me to know this. You got to get really weird in your thinking if you're a woo guy. And, but as I say, I'm not taking it personally. Universe has anything that it has showed me toward, in the sense of favoritism, keeping me alive through the colon, was entirely for universe's own benefit. It's not trying to do anything for me. I'm not special. Nobody is. This is why I get really pissed off at all these channelers and shit that, they think they've got some skill. And also, by the way, channeling never produces anything worth having. It's all this bogus, facile surface kind of shit. It in no way provides you anything extraordinary in the sense of information that you wouldn't have known anyway. This is because channeling is not what people think. People think, I'm going to rant for a second. People think that channeling is somehow opening your mind up in some external entity, just like Joe thinks it's these external spirits. He doesn't really define them any more than that. It's like, it gets really vague and so on. But channeling is thinking that there's this external entity, which you'll give it a name, and thus, therefore, it is real here in this materium, because things that are real in this materium have names. Nothing has names. And so they'll think that they're getting external information via this conduit. And what's factually happening is more akin to this idea, where you do open yourself up to an external entity. If you want to call it a spirit or a demon, that's fine. I don't give a shit. Neither of those are really descriptive, nor do they convey what the thing actually is. But that little bit of external consciousness that is impinging on your encapsulated consciousness makes you think. It actually works to make you think that it is the source of stuff, but it's just rooting around in your mind and coming up with this. So no channeler has ever produced any information that was not already in their brain. Channelers do not open a channel to an outside entity of any form that gives them information. What they do is they open up this channel to something that will trigger their mind for a lot of different reasons. Read chapter 4 of Thinking and Destiny. Maybe it's chapter 5, but one of these, it gets into it. And it pulls all this extraneous bullshit out of your brain and packages it in this rather pablum, facile form, and that's channeling. So Bashar, none of these fuckers have any validity, in my opinion, right? They're rooting around and they're not even doing it. They're allowing this process to occur with this feeling. And again, it's all emotion. That's what Joe is basing his stuff on now. At least he didn't get the point where he thinks that it's actually, that his survival was intended by Universe for him and him alone. Universe obviously has some really big thing for Joe. Okay, so this is the way this actually works. I mean, it is. You can think of it in, we may never know, right? So Joe could go through the rest of his life and it may appear absolutely ordinary. And yet he could have indeed accomplished something hugely significant that for Universe that none of us could have picked out from his actions. Maybe he has to be at a certain intersection, at a certain place, at a certain time in order that something else may not occur. And, so Universe needs him for that, so it keeps him alive. But it could be that it could be quite dramatic. You just never know. I actually think that I'm favoring that it's a dramatic thing, okay, just because of the language that shows up around Joe in processes that I run, and that has shown up around him because of the nature of his name and because of the nature or the way in which I did my data sets back in the year 2000. Joe pops into it. I've just kept it in there ever since. Anyway, so it may well be that Joe will end up having something dramatic. I think this for a number of different reasons, okay? Anyway, though, so, so it need not be a dramatic thing in order to be saved that way. But now, getting back to the time aspect of this, we won't know. We'll never be able to see. We can examine. Maybe he's going to get, be extraordinarily lucky and live to be 120, right? And maybe we'll never see what it was Universe wanted to have happen, but it obviously has a huge level of significance because of the effort that it takes for Universe to keep Joe alive through that amount of energy, through the energy that was released in that crash. So I'm a real fan of Buckminster Fuller. I examine everything on an energy principle, reduce everything to energy equations in order to get a good view and work up from there. And so there was a huge amount of energy that was liberated in the process of Joe doing that crash. And we do not see the resolution of that energy in the sense that if we thought of it in my language terms, this would be building tension, and we have yet to have any release around it, really. But anyway, so the nature of time is such that irreversibility is the key in looking at all kinds of things, especially in energy analysis calculations. And so I'm favoring the idea that Joe has some fairly dramatic stuff ahead of him in the future, obviously to the benefit of to something that Universe wants to have happen. And it may be off a number of years, we just don't know. Could happen tomorrow. That's just the way this shit goes. But I'm of the opinion that that's the way this is going to be because of the sheer amount of irreversible actions that took place in that crash. Okay, so it's all right. I'm not going to get into that. It's too tedious to detail irreversibility and how it really works. And you can actually examine energy equations for events and say, at this point there was an irreversible action. Okay, so in like the case of Joe's crashing, he's flying along and conditions force him to try and land. He's in the process of trying to land, get underneath this cloud cover, and so there were a couple of points of irreversible action. Once he was under the cloud cover, he was not coming back up through it, right? So that was irreversible at that point. Once he pulled out on his fuel lever to get more fuel, to get more power, and it did not work, and then he pushed it in and did it again, that was an irreversible action. At that point, in his mind, he was aware that it wasn't going to do any good to be fucking around with that anymore, and he had to concentrate on keeping his ass alive, right? So each and every one of these stages accumulate a number of irreversible actions, and if you deal with time in a particular way and plot it within your energy calculations, based on one of the factors being irreversible actions, you get a very interesting picture of what Joe survived and the amount of fucking around the universe had to do to accomplish that. This is a very, those are, as we note, really fucking rare for people to have crashes and walk away. So I went looking to see how statistically unlikely that was, and I could not come up with a meaningful number that said, it was like 1 out of X number of crashes, right? Because we go whole years here in the United States, and I was just plotting on single engine planes, 6-seaters or smaller. 4 is really what Joe had, I think. So, but you can't, the FAA doesn't keep all the records that way, so it's really difficult to look. But if you go and look at all this shit, we go years without that occurring. So we go years where every single crash that we have is a small plane. There's total irreversible damage. And look at what happened to Joe, right? His plane was irreversibly damaged. All of this kind of shit was irreversible. His mind was affected, but his body was not irreversibly damaged. And that is so rare, I could not find a meaningful metric by which to judge it in the past in our recent aviation history. So it's that fucking rare. So in that sense, I think, wow, universe likes Joe, but that's not necessarily good, right? Because that means universe is going to use your ass for something else, and you may not like that. If it had been my druthers, I would not have been here for these past 5 or 6 years. Yes, I've contributed and so on, and maybe there's more shit I've got to do, which is my thinking anyway. But, from my particular perspective, anyway, though, so time at that level, time as the motive force for the creation of universe, for the magnetism that holds everything together, for the creation of ether, psychic events, all of this kind of stuff, is something that is completely absent in the thinking of the normies. They think, because of Einstein, that time is a dimension, right? And they can never really wrap their heads around it. They can't describe it, but they think that time is like the 4th dimension in the sense of, length, breadth, and width, and then time, duration. And it is not a dimension at all. Like the dimensions, though, you could alter material fact here relative to time. Okay, so you can do things like time compression, time dilation. You can't travel in time, though, and all that Einsteinian stuff is really bogus that way. And the military, a number of governmental guys are following me on Twitter and Substack. Okay, and it's just really curious their particular approaches to doing so. So they think that I'm onto something relative to this. But let me say that, in my opinion, all the guys that are reverse engineering spaceships don't understand time, and they're making some assumptions that are not valid and probably going to come back and bite them in the ass later on. This would include the guys at Lockheed Martin who have reverse engineered the machinery and know how to drive it and stuff, right? They don't understand what they're doing relative to the flow of time, the nature of time, the pulse that creates the materium, and this concept of irreversibility, which is inherent in time. Okay, so time is all about irreversibility. It does not want, and it prevents the undoing of events. So all of that is a fake understanding of reality. That you can undo something, that there is a possibility for recompense. There is debt that is accrued when you wrong someone, and you carry that debt forward in time, and you may be able to make amends, but you can never undo the wrong that caused that offense in the beginning. And you can't go back and fix it. And all of our thinking and wishful thinking about time travel will be disappearing here in a fairly short period as we get into our encounters with the space aliens and all of that. But anyway, so Kozyrev, the astrophysicist, brilliant astrophysicist out of Russia in the last century, was able to identify active principles of time by which you can actually manipulate local time effects on the material. You can't alter the time itself because that is what creates the material. But you can take advantage of understanding time and cause effects within the materium on matter, including ourselves, with time. But you can't push us through it in any way, shape, or form. Now, maybe, well, we can get into that some other period. Another one of these talks. You can view, in my opinion, you can do some level of viewing, like remote viewing, out of our current time, but then you're getting into some really wooey areas there where you got to be, where you have to go into it assuming that you'll never know, that there'll never be any certainty, and that most of it is probably bogus. So to a certain extent, it's like, why bother? Anyway, okay, so in hyperspace, there are beings there that are not there by way of psychedelics. They're there by way of some form of technology, and they appear to you when you're taking psychedelics and you're in hyperspace as something other than all of the other chattery shit that's all around you. So you'll see these consciousnesses. You don't know what kind of a being they are, and you can't, it's like stupid, like Carrie Cassidy calling everything reptiles and Dracos, and she's never seen a reptile. There's never a reptilian around. She doesn't have any pictures. They don't exist in reality. It's all a delusion in her mind. But in hyperspace, there are beings there, but you don't know what the fuck they are, but you know that they are unlike you in that particular state in getting there. And these guys are like, you might say, hunkered down. They're like the road warts, the little bumps on the road, right? Their appearance within hyperspace is this little rigid shell that moves a little bit and so on, but it's not like the frenetic activity of everything else. But you definitely know that there's consciousness in there and that it's watching you as you're off doing stuff. But you also know that it's, let's just say, mechanistically there, right? It is tied to that machinery, and it doesn't have the freedom that you do when you're there on a psychedelic to go wander around and explore stuff and that sort of thing. These guys are like static. There may be some point. I think that these guys are there by way of this mind-to-machine interface technology, because there's a whole lot of stuff in ancient human literature from the people that did the mind-to-machine interface controllers on behalf of the Elohim, and reported essentially were describing experiences in hyperspace. Very much as we experience them, only they're talking about it from the perspective of being one of those road warts on the surface of hyperspace, just looking in and not being able to walk around and stuff. I'm certain you can learn things, but how useful it is, I don't know. Nonetheless, though, so these guys are there in this form, and we see them, but they are, let's say, isolated from the huge level of knowledge that you get from hyperspace. But it's kind of like, how do I say it? They don't participate in irreversible acts in hyperspace the way you do. So if you're in hyperspace and you can do things that are irreversible, as I did when I was interacting with the guy who has the emotions on his skin. And again, he has a name, I'm certain, but I don't know. You don't talk to people. It's all mental. You have to draw pictures and do all different kinds of weird shit to get ideas across. Some ideas just float right on out. So I was sitting on what appears to be a rock, which was, bitching and moaning at me for sitting on it in hyperspace. And I'm sitting next to this guy with his emotion on his skin, and he's lying next to the riverbank there, and he points and directs my attention down into this little shallow river that has non-water in it. I can't describe that, but non-water. But at the bottom of it are all these time crystals. And then I saw the time crystals all move, not in unison, but in more like a, one starts downstream and then the next one and the next one and the next one, sort of in a series. And so he was able to convey to me the idea, watch, something's going to occur. And then I saw irreversibility occur. And then I learned so much from watching that occur, right? I don't think that these other guys that are there mechanistically have that ability to get into it and understand what the hell's going on, simply because it is mechanistic for them. But they're certainly there in attempting to do things. It may be that those are simply representations of people that are using the mind-to-machine interface at that moment, and they're not attempting to be in hyperspace. That's not their goal, but rather that is just where that activity takes place. There's so much we don't know. We're really, truly ignorant pigs. But unlike, I'm going to have to wrap it up here, but unlike our academics and stuff, us woo people, will indeed accept those possibilities and will discuss them factually, openly, and so on, right? So this is what really is, you have to watch out for with all of these, like, as I was saying in the other talk, all of these new alternative voices that have been identified for you, put together, packaged, and so on. So, Naomi Wolf, I like her. I've talked to her in the past. She's a pretty good thinker, and I love her writing, but she's compromised, right? She's now in this organization, and so she can be directed, controlled. There's money involved, and there's social pressure, et cetera, and so she's compromised, and so I won't accept everything she writes as being necessarily 100% organic. Just as with Brett and and Heather and Eric and all these other fuckers. None of the academics have a clue as to the idea of irreversibility and its function here in our materium. It is probable by the end of this year that some of these academics will indeed come across this understanding and have to grapple with it. And this will be because of the reappearance of the Elohim. Or space aliens. We don't know for sure it's going to be Elohim. We don't know who the fuck it is, but there's irreversibility going on in the form of battles, contention, and it's really picking up. If we were to look at this at a realistic level and do an assay on the amount of energy involved and just make some guesses as to the resources available to the people that are or beings that are being attacked. In this, I would suggest that maybe this could be sustained for about another 6 or 7 months, and we would have some form of a conclusion. Either in that period of time, the assaulting forces will overwhelm the defenders, or the assaulting forces will potentially, and there's a lot of potential, so this is basically a big-ass guess, but would potentially diminish their resources to the point that they would stop and make an assay as to what they're attempting to gain for the expenditure of resources. So in other words, I'm saying I don't think they can keep the expenditure of energy at this level for more than another 7 or 8 months without there being some form of an irreversible act in the sense of a conclusion to some level of the contention. So there's that. Now, that is worrisome to me because it instantly begs the question to me, and that is, once the activity on the moon, once the contention on the moon is resolved one way or another, does that mean that we're going to be visited here on Earth by somebody also intent on an irreversible action? I don't know, right? You can postulate it any number of ways. It's fraught with error no matter how you do it, and it's all conjecture at this point. We will be seeing some level of resolution. We should be able to see it, and then we'll have to decide. Is it pending towards us? So if we were to postulate that the Elohim on the moon are fighting it out with whoever the fuck the ringmakers of Saturn are, then would the ringmakers come here after they destroyed the Elohim? They may, I certainly do think they would destroy the Elohim, just given the amount of resources and energy shown by the civilization or whatever the fuck we're going to call it that's out there making those rings. So anyway, a lot of speculation, but part of that speculation is pointing to data sets that are accruing now, suggesting that we're going to hit this. Okay, so there within hyper novelty, there's going to be all kinds of stuff happening, and within the hyper novelty period, we will come to some kind of a point of big irreversibility, and that will affect all the normies, all of life, et cetera, as we go forward. It may not be violent or catastrophic. It may just be a giant change in consciousness as all of us sit here and watch hundreds of thousands of UFOs flying around, right? That's going to be an irreversible act at that point. All of consciousness of the humans on Earth would have changed in that particular short period of time of all those UFOs flying around. So, but we're coming up to some kind of a point of irreversibility at a large scale, given what's going on. I also think that, within this larger mass, we'll see some of these exposures, maybe if we're looking, as to, basically what the fuck is universe got in store for Joe and the rest of us, right? But he's a good temporal marker because universe kept him alive through a hugely devastating energetic event, which was falling out of the sky in that airplane. Anyway, guys, got to get stuff done. I'll do some more of these as I can. We've been hit hard here with damage and that kind of stuff, so it's going to be few and far between. My office is just a shambles now after all of the recent storms. So, I could maybe do a video, but I'd have to be really motivated to do that. Anyway, talk to you later.